Hello everyone, I'm Grandmaster Priyadharshan Kannappan and you're watching the Gyaan YouTube channel, and this is the Checkmates in Chess series. It's been quite some time since we released the last video on checkmates on a3 square, and if you're a new viewer to the channel, this is a series of videos where we talk about checkmates that happen on the different squares of the chessboard. So we started with a1 and now we are all the way up to this video will be focusing on the b3 square. So if you had seen our previous video, you'd have known that at the end of every video we give a puzzle and you kind of have to solve it, and then on the next video I reveal a solution. So that's what we are going to be doing in this video also. So if you remember, this was the position I gave in the previous video as a puzzle for you all to solve, and I had said that what will black do if white plays king a7. So let me flip the board as we're going to be looking from black's perspective. So this is the position, and looks like, generally a rook versus rook and knight is like kind of like called a draw. But this is one of those exception positions where actually the side with rook and knight is actually going to win. And let us see how that happens. Black goes king c6. So black is trying to kind of, come parallel to this opponent's king so that then you can deliver a check, and that would be a checkmate. So king c6, a big blunder would be going something like king a6, because then just rook a3 and it's checkmate. So instead of king a6, let's look at some options for white. And let's say if white goes rook a1, trying to control this, uh, a file. Black simply goes king c7 and waits for his chance. And the point of it being, let's say if white goes something like rook a5 here, white's just, simply waiting to see what's going to happen. Black has rook b7 check. And if white goes king a8, you have knight b5, and the idea is now to give rook b8, and it's a checkmate because the knight is controlling the a7 square. And in case for rook a1, king c7, if let's say white goes something like king a8, rook b8 will be winning. So we will discuss that a bit in deep in the another variation, because it would kind of directly transpose into that. So for rook a1, if let's remove this arrow, and if king c7, and again once again let's remove the arrow so that I can explain it clearly. Rook a5, rook b7, and if let's say white decides to go king to a6. So white is like, I just want to keep my king here and I want to see what happens. Something like this would also be bad because of rook b6 check. And after king a7, knight b5 check, and after king a8, you go rook b8 and it's a checkmate. So for king a7, king c6, let's assume what if king a8, and this is also a crucial variation because after king c7, now black is threatening a checkmate in 1. So white has to go stop it, right? So that's what white does with rook a1. But this leads to the transposition that I had mentioned earlier, as now black goes rook b8 check, king a7, knight b5 check, king a6, rook a8 check, and after king takes b1, black wins the rook with rook takes a1. So for king a7, king c6, white just simply goes rook c2, kind of waiting move, but black goes king c7, and after king a6, rook a3, it is a checkmate because the king cannot escape here because the knight is controlling the square. So this was a blitz game, and I have seen it happen so many times in blitz and rapid, especially the faster time controls, that rook and knight versus rook, even though most of the rook and knight versus rook is theoretically drawn, the side with the rook makes some big blunder and they end up getting into checkmate. So if you have an option to kind of draw in a more simplistic manner than force into a rook versus rook and knight, I would suggest going into the simplistic option, because in time trouble, rook versus rook and knight actually could be tricky. And this is a very good example because the players playing with white and black are very strong grandmasters. With white side, you have Alejo Pons Francisco from Spain, and black side, you have the late Ugar Gashimo from Azerbaijan playing in this game. So let's move on to the topic of today's video, and that is going to be the checkmates that happen on the b3 square. So this is the position, and it is black to play And black starts the game here with a2, but a2 has a very big flaw to it. The problem is a2 has trapped black's king on a1 because the only escape square the king had was the a2 square. So now the king is trapped. So now you would know the topic, and I believe you would have already started working on how to get a checkmate on the b3 square. So let's see how white managed to achieve that. So white goes knight b4 first, and after bishop c5, the knight maneuvers itself to d3 because the knight wants to go to c1 the next move. So what black does? Black plays cleverly bishop e3, stopping knight c1. And now white is like, okay, you stop me from going to knight c1, I'm okay. My knight has other squares, so it goes to knight e5, and after bishop d4, it goes to knight c4. And here you see the plan that white had in mind, because now the knight is going to reach this square either by d2 to b3 or a5 to b3, and the black bishop is not in a position to stop the knight from going to one of the squares. So after bishop e3, which is a very kind of a cheeky, tricky line, because if white gets excited and goes capture the bishop, it's a stalemate. Do you want to do a stalemate? Definitely not. So you go knight a5, and after bishop b6, you go knight b3, and it is the checkmate that we are looking for. So let us move on to the next position here. So this is black to play, and the board is correctly facing from the black's perspective, and I believe this should be kind of easy for the audience. So if you're trying to solve it, pause the video, think what you would play, how you can kind of come with an idea to checkmate on b3, and then play the video. So let me reveal you the answer here. It is rook b takes to b2 with a check, and after the king goes a1, it's knight b3, and now it's a checkmate as the a1 king cannot go anywhere. And also, if you just purely count the material, black is ahead of material. So that's a very kind of a very simplistic example, I would say. So let us move on to the next example that we have here. This is the position. And again, what I would strongly suggest to players is, one, pause the video, think, solve the solution, and then check the video by playing it. In general, how do you find these moves? That's, I think, a very good question. I often get asked, or I often see very young players make mistake because they don't know what to look at. They just look at the full board and they are like confused, and they're like, okay, I don't know what to play here. So a very good starting point would always be forcing moves. Look at forcing moves. So forcing moves are where you force your opponent to make a reaction to your move. So for example, in this position, queen d1, which is the best move for black here, is a very good forcing move, because with you're giving a check and you're saying to the white's pieces that you have to react to this check. There is no other option. So you're forcing the decision of white. That is why, it's a queen d1 check is a forcing move. And after king a2, I'm sure you all have figured out what the answer is by now, which is b3. And now it's a checkmate. So how about we go to the next example? And this example is what I'm going to give to the audience as a homework. And you may be thinking, why am I giving this as a homework? Black has two extra minor pieces, the knight and the bishop. So black can win in any number of ways. But the beauty of this position is that there's a kind of a very forced checkmate that black can create in this position. So I would like you to kind of, visualize what that forced checkmate would be, and how you could see kind of a checkmate happening on this square. It looks like it's a very big, far away square from where the pieces are, black's pieces. But checkmate actually happens on the b3 square. So with that hint, I will wrap up today's episode of the b3 square checkmates. We call it the beaming b3 square. And signing off is Grandmaster Priyadharshan Kannappan. Do subscribe to the channel, watch our previous videos. If you have any comments that you think, would help us to create good content, and so on, please do put that on the comment box, and share whatever feedback you have, so that we can make more instructive videos, and, like a good content. Bye bye, everyone. Signing off, Grandmaster Priyadarshan.